Talk to people today and it doesn't take long to figure out that history, especially historical context, has been completely lost in modern society. Perhaps just as scary, there seems to be an establishment-led push being sold to the public as a grassroots movement to destroy history so that people continue not to understand it. This can be seen by the taking down of statues. Teaching history is now more important than ever. A great place to start is the American Revolution. Someone who is relatively knowledgeable will tell you about the Molasses Act, the Sugar Act, the Currency Act to control colonial printing of money, the Townsend Act, which led to the Boston Tea Party, and the Quartering Act, which actually forced colonists to have random British soldiers sleep in their homes. More knowledgeable people will use catchy phrases like, "no taxation without representation." The colonists had been denied representation in British Parliament. They might tell you that restrictions were placed on the countries that the colonists would engage in commerce with, and that the colonists were forced to carry the burden of British war and imperialism. This is all important information, key terms if you will, but understanding is lost without context. In 1775, right around the time of the shot heard around the world, where a few brave men started a revolution against the most powerful nation in the world, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense. Reading this pamphlet is a great place to start in studying American history. Of course, the shot heard around the world was more of a revolt than a revolution prior to Paine's writing of Common Sense. Paine and a small group of largely self-educated, unique minds turned a revolt into one of the greatest intellectual revolutions the world had ever seen. The true revolution was not physical, but was in ideas. In the book Common Sense, Paine laid out the case for the Declaration of Independence, rather than reconciliation with the British Crown. His pamphlet would be purchased and read by hundreds of thousands of the nearly 1.2 million people who lived in the colonies at the time. It was read out loud in taverns. At the time of the war, Britain and its colonies were ruled by a hereditary monarchy. Men who were born to rule, entitled, and above all other men simply by the false proclamation of birthright. This was still common throughout the Western world. Paine argued that hereditary monarchies are in contradiction with the rules of nature, the only rule that governs man. This is known as natural law, something later referenced in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Natural law is a philosophy asserting that certain rights are inherent by virtue of human nature. They are endowed by nature. As determined by nature, the law of nature is implied to be universal, existing independently and superseding law of a state, political order, legislator, or a society at large. Natural law states that men are born equal, and because of this, the state's only job is to guarantee that a person has the individual liberty that he is born with. This is the foundation of freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to privacy, the right to a fair trial, all radical ideas at the time. Religion was also of the utmost importance. Paine argued that men have the right to practice religion without government interference, which was one of the main reasons so many people risked their lives to travel across the Atlantic Ocean and to explore a new world. Of equal importance, or perhaps more, natural law states that because men are born equal, no man or state has the right to confiscate the property of another. True liberty does not exist without property rights. Inevitably, disputes arise between people over property. Paine argued that this was the purpose of government, to have a neutral third party settle property disputes so that people do not have to resort to violence. He argued that we trade some liberty so that property rights can be handled peacefully. Hence, the protection of property rights, not the confiscation of property, think taxation, is the true role of government. Government is to ensure basic protection of property. Checking the power of government as a third-party arbitrator is thus essential. To do this, Paine discussed the idea of combining liberalism, government by the natural law we discussed, and republicanism, a government in which the people choose representatives to meet routinely and discuss the concern of each local area. The Constitution protects our liberty through natural law, and the republicanism gives us the right to vote to be represented. The purpose of republicanism is to keep the government small, so that each small area has its property rights protected, along with the natural rights of life and liberty. Paine argued that the Declaration of Independence from the British monarchy was common sense, as the hereditary system was in contrast with natural law, and that because of that, the colonists can better represent their own rights of property and individual liberty at the local level. The purpose of government has not changed to this day. Government derives its power through the consent of the governed. Government is supposed to protect property rights, individual freedom as endowed by nature, the true birthright, and by freedom to practice religion. The problem today is that government has become too large. Government creates, manufactures, or hypes up one problem after another and then promises a quick fix. The fixes that the government offers generally make the problems at hand worse than at the start, create additional problems, and contradict the property rights, natural rights, and religious liberty that people are endowed with at birth. The push for government today is to be global. The answer is not globalism or even nationalism. The answer is to get back to American roots, to vote to shrink the government at the global and federal level so that your vote can become increasingly more powerful at the local level. Even today, this is still common sense.